Hey Salad Smack, this is Erin McDermott. In this video, we bring you coverage of a panel called Navigating the Stages of Building a Hardware Company. The event took place January 30th, 2019, and was hosted by Synapse Product Development's Seattle, Washington location. It was also sponsored by Dragon Innovation and included other panelists from Glowforge, Hackster, and Root Ventures. Plus, there was beer on tap, so I was there with bells on.
Friends, Dragon, and Hackster, and Root, and Glowforge to talk about navigating the stages of building a hardware company. For those of you who aren't familiar with Synapse, we are a full-service product consultancy firm. So we work with companies starting at early product definition all the way through production ramp-up to help our clients avoid the pitfalls that you find in hardware development, which I'm sure we're going to just talk about some of those, and make sure that they can get products delivered in volume.
So we're really psyched to be here and talk about hardware. So we're going to have a really fun panel. What I thought is I just give a little background on Dragon, and then we can go down and learn about who we have sharing their knowledge with us. For me, I'm a mechanical engineer by training and have always really loved robots. I was incredibly fortunate to work at iRobot in the early days and was really focused on taking the Roomba from a working prototype all the way through high volume manufacturing back in the early 2000s, when really we're kind of like in the dark ages of hardware, and that only really large companies had the ability to launch a hardware product for so many reasons that we'll talk about. And thank God those days have changed, and actually now it's much more democratized that entrepreneurs and companies that are small with a great idea can launch incredible products, as can larger established companies that used to do everything really slow. They're going a lot faster.
It's a large community for hardware developers, hackers, makers. People actually post online anything, any open source project that it could be anything from rocket scientists, autonomous vehicles and robotics, all the way to just light switches and really cute little jewelry items. So anything whatsoever shows up on Hackster. There's about 16,000 open source projects on Hackster today, and the community is over 800,000 members, and it grows at around 50,000 a month. What we do at Hackster, really giving people a place to showcase their work, and for other people to come and learn through their bill of materials, schematics, source code, etc. And also, we are really lucky. We got acquired by Avnet as well.
I know I won't go too much in, but a little bit on my personal background. Again, my name's Heather, and I'm with Synapse. So coming into kind of background in hardware, I used to build underwater robots in a past life, and I wanted to build robots for science, which is definitely the best. Unfortunately, most of robots, underwater robots, are for oil and defense, which is not quite science. So moved more into consumer products and have done a YC company, have helped, mentored a bunch of hardware startups, have been part of hardware startups before Kickstarter and Indiegogo were a thing, which dates me a little bit, but bringing products to the market, and then also worked at Maker Media, helping other companies get their products to market. And also at, I guess most recently was with Particle, which is an IoT platform. So I've seen a variety of hardware companies from beginning through growth and helped many others do so. And so that's another role that, what I'm excited about here at Synapse is, again, helping companies get products to market. And so excited to talk about that tonight.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Meyer, so I'm a partner at Root Ventures. Root Ventures, we're based in San Francisco, and we are a seed stage hard tech venture firm. We like to invest very early into companies that are solving really hard technical problems. Turns out hardware is very hard, so it very much fits into our thesis, and about half of our portfolio companies today do hardware in some way, shape, or form.
Glowforge has been a fantastic company to learn as well as contribute, because I've worked with companies like Ford and GE and Shell, and you can take those best practices and you can say, how do you set it up so that you do things right the first time around so that you can scale without having to go back and change your operations. So that's what I'd like to share with you today.
So we'll start with Adam. So let's say as a hardware entrepreneur, I'm a first timer, maybe I've been in software before, but I've got a great idea. and I want to figure out like what's the next step, how do you do this? One of the things I love about Hackster is that rather than creating and trying to climb the learning curve from scratch, I can look at how other people have started. Can you sort of walk through how, with whatever my idea is, how I might leverage Hackster to get some ideas and be able to take that and make a prototype and see if there's a there, do some customer testing, and get rolling?
Sure. So I think I'll address it from a Hackster perspective, like what I see people do on the site, and also just from my own perspective, what I've done to kind of learn. So I think in the offline world, for me, when I started, I had an idea. I really did not know anything about it, technically speaking. So I would go to events like this, and everybody that I've met, there's so many people here that I've met from like Monica and Rex and John, over there from ARM and Clarissa, a bunch of people I would meet at meetups. And I would go to meetups to kind of meet people and ask friends, hey, I'm looking for a double E, somebody who can make like a PCB. This is even before I even heard that you can actually prototype with Arduino, before Raspberry Pi even happened. So I think that tapping into your network and finding the person that has the skill set that you don't have and has that entrepreneurial spirit that they're willing to do some cycles outside of work because everybody has a job, but meet on weekends and try things out with you, that's going to be your best resource to get started. Because otherwise, in hardware in particular, unlike software or services, there is no way that one person has more than, I don't know, maybe 3 skills. Like a double E will not be an industrial designer. Industrial design does not write firmware. A firmware person does not understand supply chain and manufacturing, and then none of them understand business and retail. So it's really you have so many things. It's probably, I would guess, about 5 times more resources than a typical business or software company or small business to get started. So tap into these networks, show up to these meetups, and there's a lot of kind of forums like people should stand up and say, hey, I'm looking for help. And that's what I did, and that's how I met both of my co-founders in 2 companies.
So I love to build Halloween candy robots, which both are posted on Hackster. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I love to dabble in software. But ultimately, I'll get myself stuck. And in my case, I was trying to drive a stepper motor, which would go and lock up the processor if I tried to do things, or some kid that had way too much sugar, kept hitting the candy button, and the whole thing would lock up. And I was lucky that working at iRobot, I had access to a lot of just amazing software engineers that were able to say, oh, hey, Scott, this, do that. But if I didn't have that, are there ways in Hackster I can pose a question or throw up a problem and have somebody say, oh, you do, this is what you do?
Yeah, you can do that. So you can go to the projects that you like, and then you pose a quick question. Most likely than not, the person who posts the project will answer your question. And you can, and to be honest with you guys, to give you a full value of this panel, Stack Overflow will give it the same. Some groups on Reddit, some places on GitHub. So there's a lot of places to ask the questions. People really want for you to ask these questions. It's a great compliment that you actually engage with the content. So ask the questions, and I see this all the time on Hackster. Great project, get a lot of technical questions, about fuel gauges and voltage and temperature, and they really want to know, well, how did you make this work? Because I tried and I got stuck. So ask these questions. It's amazing. You have your free access to hundreds of thousands of engineers that will just help you without you hiring anybody. So you can solve things so fast today.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing time. I remember, again, back in the early days of iRobot, if we wanted to spin a motor, we had to get a bunch of MIT graduates to go and try to figure out how to design an H-bridge, which transistors to buy, which flyback diodes. You'd send the board away for 2 weeks, you'd get it back, and then maybe at the end of it, if we were lucky, the motor would turn. Whereas today with my 9-year-old daughter, we can be spinning motors with Arduino in like 5 minutes and then do something more interesting, like build Halloween machines. So yeah, we live in an incredible world. It's really, really fun. Okay, so let's say now we had an idea, we looked in Hackster, we built a prototype, and now we're like, wow, there's a there. We want to start making it a little bit more real, because as often what we find is what you use to build one isn't the same processor or manufacturing technique you might want to use to build many. So in that case, let's say we go to Synapse, and for Heather, what stage do you typically get involved, and how do you think through when you get the thing thrown on the table, which is kind of like a rat's nest of wires, but with hopefully a good business case behind it. How do you think through the next steps and help guide the entrepreneur or the company?
Sure thing. So we definitely, we work with startups who come in, as you mentioned, stuff on the, pile on the table, as well as sometimes bring in of a, hey, already gone through, but we're having an issue with, we need to reduce our BOM or make this waterproof or fix this, we're not getting the yields we want. So a variety of places, but specifically in terms of kind of think startup company, done your prototype and now need to actually build the product that's going to ramp up to production. I'd say some of the things that, if you want to be successful at that stage, when you're starting to look for people who can help you get to that next step, what Adam was talking about earlier about knowing what you want to build at the end, what the customer needs, and sharing that with whoever you're talking with who's going to help you take that next step. Instead of coming to them and say, hey, this is what I built, now make this big. You don't want them to build the exact same thing you just built, right? You want to actually share with them, hey, look, this is my vision, and this prototype here is to help you understand my vision, but you're the experts in these areas. Tell me what are other ways I might be able to get to my end result. Whether it's a component difference, but it might even be another completely different kind of technique to get you there. Maybe you happen to, if you are that mechanical engineer from MIT, or you have a background in firmware, or your areas, be honest with yourself about what those are, and be honest with your partners about what those are, but also be honest about what you don't know. The other aspect there is if you're trying to find a partner in the same way that you buy components off of Avnet, you're going to have a problem, right? You're going to get the same level, that sounds bad on Avnet, the same level of service. You're not going to go up to each one and say, well, this one I can get it for a penny less over here, or a penny more over there, so I'm going to get the penny less one. Because even with, you're going to see, well, I know if I have a relationship with Avnet, then I'm going to be able to get this component when everyone else is out of stock, I'm going to be able to get it, even though it's going to be that penny more. Similar when you're looking at service companies that are going to work with you to help you design and bring it to the next level. If you go around saying, well, what's this $1 an hour, or what's, this diving into kind of proxy comparisons, you're going to get yourself in trouble. And I think one of the challenges we see, especially with startups, is a lot of folks, if they're doing a startup for the first time, they're coming with a consumer mindset, and they've been prototyping and buying components online in that consumer mindset of how can I get the cheapest thing here, I just need to scramble it together, which is super great at that very beginning. But when you're now starting to think like a business, like a startup, it's about value, is that core bit. And so you want to find partners who are going to bring you good value.
As you work through the process, how much of the design for manufacture and assembly do you incorporate in the early stage, which we often call DFMA? So for example, if you're building a single unit, maybe you 3D print it, and you can 3D print almost anything, but if you're building, for better or for worse, but if you're building 100,000 of it, then you probably need a faster cycle time, lower cost technology, so maybe you injection mold it. But then you start getting into things like drafts and rounds and uniform wall thicknesses, which is its own kit and caboodle. And sort of the trade-off I would usually look at is early up front, you don't want to do a lot of DFMA because maybe you'll throw it away, you just want to see if it works. But if you design a product that's not manufacturable, then it's insanely inefficient. So how do you think about those trade-offs and advise your customers?
No, that's fantastic. And so at Synapse, one of the cool things is that we have all the different disciplines under one roof. So we have mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, software firmware engineers, and NPI, new product introduction, all working together as a team to make sure that your product moves forward in a smooth way, and also that we catch all of those kind of complexities. And that's one of the things that we see a lot of companies sometimes falter by not including that design for manufacture, but not just design for manufacture, but also that NPI, understanding that early on. And yes, you don't need to overinvest in that early on. You don't need to make sure that wall thickness is absolutely perfect in your first run of 10. But you need to be aware of how will this be manufactured at the beginning. And so I think it's absolutely critical to think with that mindset, and also in that same way, if you're working with an electrical engineer who's never done anything in volume, they might be able to make that prototype for you, but also, again, they might choose components that don't work, which require a complete redesign. Whereas if you work with an electrical engineer who's like, okay, I see, you're going to be going this direction, so let's lay down the foundation today that will get you to that direction. It might be a little bit more expensive up front, but cheaper overall when you go along that process.
Oh, I'm saying it totally resonates when I first designed my first product, I had no idea. I never even heard about DFM or DFMA. And then I went to I met my friends from Handle Studios, Treasure and Greg over there, and because I'm in Seattle, and I found them somehow, and they kind of told me this your design. There's no machining to create this shape from aluminum, unless you maybe Apple to create your own machines, you know.
That is also, again, in that be honest with you about what you know, what you don't know. Also be honest about what is this first run. We definitely have companies sometimes come and say, oh yeah, and I'm going to need 1 million of these, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute here. Like, do you really need 1 million in year one? Because again, the design that's going to go into that will be different. And it's okay to say, you know what, what I actually need is I need 1 to get that investor to invest, right? And then I'm going to need 10 so that I can test it or get it certified. And then I'm going to need 100 to get feedback from my customers. And those designs are going to iterate over time. So yeah, don't think you're going to like have one design ever and then great, done, it's to market and you're rich. Sorry, reality check on that one.
And I think another piece of that is engage your supply chain early. Like the earlier you engage your supply chain, even if you're not kicking off formal designs and saying, please go build me 1,000 of something, at least they can give you feedback that like, hey, this design you 3D printed, there's no way you're ever going to be able to injection mold that. You're going to have to completely redesign your whole product from scratch.
Yeah, so let's talk about money. So let's say we built this thing and we're feeling pretty good about it, and now we're thinking about scaling, and we decide to go raise around and explore. So Chrissy, what are some of the things as an investor you would look for in say a hardware project that would be a good fit for VC?
Yeah, so the first thing that I think is worth mentioning is that as VCs, we do not invest in products and we do not invest in technologies. We invest in businesses, and that's, for me, that's a really, really hard thing to wrap my head around because I'm a double E by training, right? Like I see a really cool technology or a really cool hardware product and I get like super giddy and I get really excited and I just want to throw money at them immediately. But it's hard. You have to take a step back and say, this is a cool product, but it's going to be very, very difficult to build a scalable business around it. What is their pricing strategy? What is their business model? What is their go-to-market? You have to look at all of this in aggregate. And I mean, I'm looking at a company and a potential deal right now that like as a double E, I really, really want this product to exist. And I think it's super, super cool. But I also think that there's going to be 1,000,001 pitfalls when they go to try to scale this thing. And ultimately, like I don't think that they have a really scalable business model around it. So it's hard for me as an engineer, but I think that we're looking for investments that have recurring revenue, that have a SaaS component to it. We're looking for things that are hardware products that are used to build an ecosystem or used to build some sort of platform around, something that is beyond just hardware for margin, because selling hardware and just making margin off of that is a really hard business model to sell to venture capitalists these days.
Let's say we had a product that's probably never going to grow to 100 million, but it's something that should exist. And I'm in the same boat with you. It's funny, I was on another panel, which was all VCs, and somehow I was in the wrong spot. I thought it was about robots, and I love robots. And all the VCs were like saying, no, I wouldn't invest in that and that. And I'd be like, oh, I'd invest in them all. It would have been a disaster. But let's say, so we have one that maybe it's not venture backable, but it's still something that's a pretty cool idea. Maybe it could generate some type of revenue. What are other sources of money that one could consider?
Yeah, so I probably shouldn't stand up here and say this as a venture capitalist, but do not take $1 of venture money if you don't have to. It's something that you've got to be really deliberate about, because if you think about the way like venture funds are structured, especially at the seed stage, venture capitalists are looking for the one deal or the 2 deals out of their portfolio that are going to make them 100x return, and that's going to pay off the rest of the fund. So when you're investing at this stage, you're expecting that half of your portfolio companies are going to fail. You're expecting that half of them are either going to return like no money at all, or they're going to return something less than the amount of money that you put in. So it's an interesting perspective in that VCs are very motivated to push their companies to grow really, really quickly and to go big or go home. So taking venture money has its pros and cons, but I say like don't do it if you don't have to. So alternatives that are out there, like you can get SBIR grants, you can get NSF grants, you can raise money from friends and family if you're so fortunate to have some wealthy friends and family. There's lots of angel investors out there. Another thing in the hardware space that you can kind of think about is that if you find the right manufacturing partner, some of them are willing to absorb part of the NRE and absorb portions of the development fees. It's hard to do, and you've got to paint a really, really compelling story, but I've been able to do that a couple of times, and it can really help.
So let's say we've been able to build this product, we've got funding, we're feeling really good. So then we go to the next stage. We want to start scaling and start thinking about the money we need. Do you have any advice, Renuka, on how we think about cash flow? And because that's the thing that I've seen kill, running out of money is the one thing that will kill a company. And with hardware, there's unique criteria from lead times and payment terms and all this other stuff. So how do you think about cash flow and how do you prepare for that?
I dream cash flow. So I think the main thing is both from a personal and professional, right? So you got to figure out what is it that you need, what is it that you want. And one of the things, I joined Glowforge after the Kickstarter, which was extremely successful. But one of the things they taught me, which as I said, this was a great learning experience, is once they got the money from the Kickstarter, they said it is not going to be used for our day-to-day. We need to go out and get funding on how do we exist as a company and how do we pay our bills, because that money is going towards our product. So which I think is a very, very fiscally responsible way of looking at it. And then the second is developing a relationship with your supply chain and deciding if you're going to build it in-house or you're going to use a contract manufacturer. And most of us will say we don't have the resources. Good electrical engineers, you can't go up and down, you can't be vertically integrated, therefore you're going to go with a contract manufacturer. Who are you going to go with? Your first choice would be that you need to have a credible partner that is going to provide you the technical expertise. Yes, it's going to be more expensive, but it is scalable because they do this for a living, and they can walk you through from how do you get from an NPI plant all the way to a full-fledged manufacturing facility. Manufacturing cost for building, so cost of goods sold, the cost it takes to build one of that widget or gadget that we're building is sometimes it's going to start from being almost 100% of your revenue, and then you got to take it down to being maybe hopefully 30-40%, so that your gross margin helps to pay for your R&D and your sales and your other initiatives.
Holding too much inventory can kill you. It can literally kill your company in the blink of an eye. So my advice to early stage hardware startups is always be chasing upside. Always be chasing upside. If you're calling every supplier on your bomb and like trying to get extra allocation at the last minute, that's a good problem to have.
One other aspect on the know your customer, it's also you need to know your supply chain, but also your distribution chain. If you're selling directly to your customer, then you can have a little bit more visibility into that demand because they're coming directly to you. But oftentimes you're going to be selling through other folks. Retailers, distributors are going to be between you and your customer. And so you need to build those relationships with your retailers, with your distributors, to understand what their buying cycle is. And also you might find that they're sitting on a bunch of inventory that didn't sell as they expected, and they're not placing an order for you when you're building more expecting them to do a quarterly order from you, or that they've sold out and they haven't given you any notice and all of a sudden drop you a huge PO for something that you can't deliver.
Invest the time in building relationship capital so that you're friends with those folks. So when you need to call in a favor, they answer your phone. And when you desperately need a part delivered tomorrow or next week and it's a line down situation, you can call in the favor and they want to help you out. So build relationship capital with your supply chain. It is so important for startups.
right? There's kind of that saying, you have speed, you have quality, and then you have cost. You get to like pick one. So many companies I talk to are like, I want it all. It's like, great, don't we all, right? I would also love that, and a unicorn and $1 billion. But what are you actually going to get? And the thing is, you're doing yourself a disservice. Some people think, oh, I'm driving my supply chain to get it all, and if I don't drive them hard, I'm not going to get it all. But the thing is, what you're not seeing is they're going to make that decision for you, right? Because at the end of the day, something has to be the biggest priority to make a decision. And every single day, a ton of decisions are being made that they can't necessarily consult you on, whether it's designing the product or figuring out how, who's going to get allocated what. They're making tons of decisions that add up. Seeing voice see so many people become more familiar with voice and start to expect to be able to talk to devices. So it's definitely an area that I'm seeing much more activity at.
Another thing that we're really excited about is like there's so much money has gone into the autonomous vehicle wars over the past several years that there have been huge increases in sensing technologies and compute and power. So we're starting to see more and more of that trickle down into other applications. So more industrial applications, manufacturing, logistics. And those are the types of investments that we're excited to make.
So we work with a lot of startups at Hackster. So we have this kind of business model we call it Robin Hood. We take from Intel and we don't take from startups. That's how we pay our bills. But so a lot of startups come to work with us because otherwise there'll be a barrier of cost. And we say, if you're a startup, we'll probably charge you very little or nothing because we want to bring them into the fold because we want people to play with all these technologies. So we see two trends. One is a mega trend, no surprise, connected to what you said. It's machine learning and AI. And you see a lot of that, the interaction with hardware and automating things, it's everywhere. We work with a company called Snips.ai. They won all these awards at CES. So it's kind of like the Alexa on a private label with all the privacy. It doesn't run by Google, Amazon, Apple, etc. You can actually build this kind of AI and machine learning algorithms through voice interaction on a private network. So that's one. Or we work with a bunch of semiconductor players, silicon players like Mythic.ai, building a brand new chip from the ground up, just completely to handle really complex computational algorithms for machine learning. So you see a lot of this as like Chirp.ai, so many the .ai extension now, whatever it stands for. That is kind of like a flood. Everywhere we go on Hackster, it's AI now. And also, which is really interesting, so cryptocurrency happened and now it's not happening. So that's on hold or dead. But let's just say it's on hold. It's not that interesting at the moment. But a few survivors that actually really took blockchain seriously and were biblical about it are actually delivering some interesting stuff. So now we're seeing a few companies that are doing some really interesting blockchain, routers. They're building this kind of like an internet service based on blockchain, So it's a private, more secure, and no big brother kind of view into your network. Asset management and tracking using, smart contracts with blockchain. So several companies now are coming to us and saying, no, we actually do believe in that. We actually have real products, hardware and software, often a combination of both. And it seems pretty legitimate. We're trying to kind of scratch it to see if it's going to fall apart, but they actually have real funding and they're building real products and they seem really real.
Thanks for watching. For more information, check out the full article on solidsmack.com.